You have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, that song is one of my favorite songs ever.
Yeah.
It's like, well, there's one song on it, but that album is very much like the Talking Heads also. So we've been recording this time, and I've said that I want to, I'm no longer going to tell people welcome back. So here
you are welcoming people back.
I'm not welcoming any of you back. I'm not glad you're here. No, I'm glad you're listening. I love to sit down and talk with people who I have many, many, many different things in common with. And of course, it happens when you are sitting across from someone that you taught when they were in the 7th grade and you coached them through high school. And we have very similar tastes in a lot of things. And Noah Kirby, it's nice to have you across the table from me for this podcast.
Excited to be here. Appreciate you having me.
And we're going to talk about all different kinds of things. One thing I wanted to talk about, did you safely get through Mason City since it's torn to shreds?
I did, but that is why I am late.
Well,
I got here a little later because I wasn't.
I should have warned
you.
Well, you probably knew.
My dad,
because your dad's life has got to have been turned.
Yeah, so he has told me, and even still, I just kind of forgot. He called me on the way here, and then I just got on autopilot, rolled into town, and sat at a stoplight for like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And,
if you're listening to us, there aren't stoplights in Mason City normally, but there are now because it's one lane traffic through
a culture shock.
through the main road right by the house that you grew up in. Mm-hmm. And the street's called Chestnut. And I've been down at one time in the last 2 months. And when I went by your dad's that one time about a week and a half ago, I was like, I don't know how your dad, that'd be such a pain in the neck.
They were telling him like, hey, you can't, like when you back out, just, go the direction of traffic because like they're so far away on either end. He doesn't know.
Yeah, he couldn't
like
tell.
when he can back out if depending on which, direction he's going.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been rough.
Yeah, it's something else. And when you live in a small town and you're going to work and it usually takes you just a couple minutes and you're not weaving your way through town. Yeah, I'm over it.
Yeah.
I mean,
he said he counted
small things.
He said he counted one day and it was like 7 minutes at the stoplight, which is crazy.
Rhonda said she heard that they were saying that they were set at 9 minutes.
Oh, really?
Which I pulled up to when I turned at Dewdrop to go, I was getting ready to go straight through and it was green, but the cop was sitting there too. And I turned left. I'm like, well, I'll just take it. Well, then I don't get on it and it turns yellow and then red like instantaneously. And I'm like, well, he's sitting right there and they've been stopping people left and right. So I'm like, I'm not sitting here for 9 minutes. Nobody's behind me. I backed up. I'm like, if I'm going to get a ticket, I'll take it, but I'm not.
I'm going to get home first.
But right. I am not doing this.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you made it through the war zone that is now Chestnut. Hopefully it'll be done soon. Like I said, a lot of things we can talk about. Why don't we start with fatherhood? You've recently become a father for the first time. We are sitting in an empty nest currently, and it's heavenly. How is having a nest now and someone in the nest?
It's great. I mean, I have a little girl, Mary. She's about 3.5 months old, and no matter how much people tell you things are going to change or how much advice you get or anything like that, it doesn't matter. Like until you're doing it, it's just words. And then, but then I think you realize regardless of any advice you do or don't get, how natural everything comes. Like I never changed a diaper. I had like this hard, firm rule that I don't hold kids until they're over 6 months old because babies freak me out. They're so fragile. And then, day one, it's like, all right, like I'm like football carrying this newborn baby. We're changing diapers. Like you have to jump in. And so everything just kind of clicked. So things clicked into place that I didn't even know were out of place.
Right.
But yeah, and she's been a very easy baby, which makes the transition a lot easier. I don't, I feel bad sometimes when I talk to current friends or family who have their own babies or just anyone who's, had to care for them. Like yesterday, she slept from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. at 3 months old, which most people are getting up like every 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then we got up, we fed her, and then she slept from 7:30 to noon or something like that. Yeah. And it's just like, it's hard to complain when you have a 3-month-old and you're still getting almost 8 hours of sleep every night. Yeah. So, I mean, I've already warned my wife that the next child will not be easy. So we need to...
Don't get used to it.
Yeah, like, let's not get used to this, because if we have a second child at any point, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, it's funny when I think back to, when Hannah was born, Rhonda had all these things that she was going to do, and then she threw them all out the window because she nursed, and like Hannah was going to sleep in the crib and the bassinet and all this, and our 3 kids slept in bed with us when they were babies like that. So I can't really take much of being a true father, I guess, because I never had to get up in the middle of the night and give anybody a bottle or whatever. And she always did that. But yeah, you're right. I didn't change the diaper till I changed a diaper for the first time. And I was like you too, for the most part. I wasn't a big fan when I was younger of holding other people's kids, not because I didn't want to, but and I won't now either. And I wouldn't even after I'd done it with my 3 very much, because you just don't want to. They are fragile, really fragile at the beginning, obviously, and it's different. Yeah, and I know, like for me, we would be in a public place, not a public. You would be somewhere like the church, or you're at a birthday party or somewhere like that. I don't mean like at McDonald's, but you're somewhere where someone was letting everybody pass their kid around. And when Hannah was born, I'm like, I don't like that. Even people that you knew, but they're like, she's moving her way around the room with all these different people. And, not.
So I'm not
it wasn't my thing.
I'm not that strict. Christy's maybe a little more strict with something like that, but I'm just like, I hold this baby all day. Right. Would you like her? Like, you can take her for a little bit. Like, if she starts fussing, I'll take her back. But we do trivia up in Bloomington every Tuesday night. We go to a bar and do trivia with some friends. And I'm already at the point where I show up, we take her out of the car seat. I have no issue just looking to one of the people around the table, like, do any of you want to hold her? Like,
right.
Please, like, don't feel like you can't ask if you want her, like take her. So obviously there are limits to that, but I have not had that issue. Like, when people come over, I'm just like, yeah, take her. Like, wash your hands and then take her. I don't care.
I don't know what it was, but it was just one of my things. And Rhonda, she didn't have a problem with it either. But I was just like, I don't know if I trust that person. I don't know if I trust that person. Yeah.
Well, if I don't trust someone, that's when you lie.
Right.
And
but
it's just like,
but even some of the people I've known my whole life, and I still was like, I don't know about that person.
Yeah. No, if I have any reason not to trust you, then maybe it's like, well, she's been kind of fussy. Like, I'll just hold on to her for a little bit. But for the most part, I've not had that issue.
I wonder though, I can't remember. I wonder if I was like that one, Cole. Like, is it a?
There's no way you were like that with Cole.
With Cole, it's like just whatever. I don't. By the time you get the third one, maybe you're not.
You probably weren't like that with Gage either.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably lessened with the 3 of them, but yeah, it definitely changes your life and your perspective on so many different things. It's something else.
Yeah, well, it's also just so fun to, like, the things that I love or that my wife loves, and she's 3 months old. Like, she's not going to remember any of this, but it's still fun to, like, share those things with her. Like, the Olympics are going on right now. And so my wife, and now me, based after, being with my wife for 9 years, really big U.S. women's national team, soccer fans. It's like the first couple times of, like, us getting to watch those women play with our daughter, which is really fun. And, like, again, she's not going to remember it. It'll probably be more special, like, the first time we go watch a game or whenever she's even kind of interested in soccer. Yeah. But, those have been really fun. Or when I listen to a song, or like I'm like singing a song to her or something, or, coming up soon, she'll get to watch her first Kansas basketball game. That'll be real nice.
Right. So. Yeah. You've got to have multiple Kansas outfits.
So actually, no, we haven't gotten much, but I was like, I want to wait until the season starts so we can see how, what size we need to get her. Yeah. But she will have lots of Kansas gear here soon.
It's fun now to be a parent because you have access to so much more of that than what, like, even, my kids are only in their early 20s, but, like, my buddy Jerry found a Lakers coat that Hannah wore, but like that was a huge deal. Like online, you can find anything now. Like you can dress them in whatever music, sports, whatever stuff that, we were stuck with Elmo and Winnie the Pooh. We weren't finding a whole lot of Lakers gear when our kids were little.
And now, you could find
easily.
You could go to the NBA store right now probably and get like a 6-pack of Lakers onesies for like $120 because it's official gear, but you could find it.
Yeah. I remember, I'll see stuff now and be like all bummed out that didn't have that stuff when my kids were little. So, I'm happy for you guys. It's a fun.
Thanks.
I'm making all these great memories now. Yeah. So, and
been
gonna try to add to the team too.
At some point, but she's 3 months old. Let's not talk about that.
Right. Yeah. I can say from experience, my 3 being really close together, I remember thinking, this is a bad thing. And it's funny that it hasn't been. Like they're as close as can be. I remember people telling us that they would be really close, and you're like, yeah, whatever. But they actually are.
Well, it's nice whenever
they look out for one another. They
at this
live
point,
5 minutes away.
But
right?
when they were babies,
no.
probably sucked that they were so close in age, and you've got
just fight constantly.
Yeah.
Engage was always the pot stirrer. He caused most of the fighting in the house, and it's fun. I never, when they were little, would have expected Gage and Cole to live together as much as they harass. I mean, they still harass each other, but it's on a different level.
Yeah, but for me, like seeing my sister with 6 kids, all like 2 years apart, seeing what it's like to have children that close, which is again great because they are very close. All of them as siblings are really close. But when I'd go over to her house and there's like a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn, kind of made me hesitate towards having
whether you were gonna,
at least the gap between how many kids,
Right. Yeah.
But and my brother and I are 16 months apart, so I have that with Seth, where he and I, I lived that growing up with a sibling so close in age, like Gage and Cole. A lot of fighting and stuff at that point, but then once as we got older, that goes away. Yeah.
It's definitely it's one of the better things you can do is get to be a parent.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, the opportunity, like eventually Kansas basketball and music and movies and this and that. Yeah. And every once in a while I'll pop up on Facebook as Cole got older and when he was the only one left in the house, watching the TV show Cheers, like, and being able to talk about that and 80s music and whatever. So, what a great segue. Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Those of you listening who maybe don't know Noah or know that Noah is read the books
a lot of times.
Yeah. And if you don't know the Game of Thrones books, they're all over 900, aren't they?
Close to. Yeah.
Right around.
All over 800 for sure.
Yeah.
To show you how often
books.
I read them, I think the first book's 823 pages.
Yeah.
So
I knew they were pushing 1,000.
Yeah. So it's a few of them are over 1,000. Yeah. But I've read those books, those 5, and then the 2 like spin-off books I've read multiple times as well. And my senior thesis at college was on A Song of Ice and Fire, like the books and religion. So, I mean, it wasn't just like a hobby. Like that became an academic pursuit there for a while as well. So yeah, I'm well versed in Thrones.
So no one has to question whether you're a fan or not, or whether you know what you're talking about when we say.
I mean, you can question if I know what I'm talking about. I probably do, but you can question it.
Right. Yeah.
I've got 2 tattoos from the A Song of Ice and Fire series. Like, yeah, I'm all over it.
Yeah. I remember bring up my buddy Jerry again. He showed the first episode of the first season to me. I don't know how many years ago. When would it have come out?
The show would have come out in like 20.
The first, I don't even
10 maybe 2011.
Yeah, I remember him showing it to me at a friend of ours, Kevin's house, and he was like, "You got to start watching this." And I'm just not a big TV show guy, and at that time we weren't gonna have HBO, so we wouldn't have been able to watch it. I mean, he was showing it to me on Blu-ray, and it was something. The first episode, it would probably be one of those things that would either draw you in or kick you away, especially by the end of the first episode.
I say it's the end of the first episode.
Starts with the beheading and ends with an interesting thing that we won't get into, but either it's your cup of tea or it's not.
Yeah.
And I knew it would be, I honestly believe this is the kind of thing Rhonda's not going to like this.
Mm-hmm.
She's not going to like it at all when I started watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's insane. She just loved it.
Yeah.
She
That's
loved it.
The crazy thing about that show specifically is how many people that I know would have never been into anything that you would consider fantasy. And
on that level too.
Yeah. But, and then just jumping right in, like,
Right.
And being on it from the get-go, like people from Mason City that, you know, when they saw me reading, not even this book, just any book, you know, right. And they saw me reading, you know, poked fun at that, or, you know, see me playing my dumb fantasy video games or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever.
Right.
And then I, you know, meet back up with them in college and they're like, oh yeah, like we got people coming over to watch Game of Thrones. It's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Like, not only are you watching it, you're that into it. Like,
right.
You used to give me like crap for that. But so, yeah, it's the definition of a crossover hit as far as genre is concerned.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're talking dragons, a lot of gory violence, a lot of gratuitous sex scenes,
especially early on. Yeah,
yeah, and language that my wife wouldn't normally put up with,
magic and zombies, and yeah,
and it is just unbelievable, like. When we were binging through it, which binging through something isn't always a good thing either, because you go so quickly that you're not able to almost absorb it sometimes. Because there's things that I go back and will watch an episode and I'm like, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Did I fall asleep because we were at the end of the binge, or you know, like we were up at? Because I can remember that's what was funny about Rhonda liking it is, you know, Rhonda works at a bank and has to be up and around early. I mean, I can get up last minute, you know, you're bald headed and whatever. You don't
roll right out of bed.
I don't have to get this guy ready. And we'd be like 12:30 at night. And she's like, you want to watch one more? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Are you nuts? And you would, because it was that you just couldn't wait to find out what happened next. And so many twists and turns. And it's known for the fact that you would have, no spoilers, but you have multiple characters that you love that you're sure are going to make it.
No
to the
characters
end.
Are safe.
Yeah, no characters are safe. And you know, one of its most famous, you know, the Red Wedding. One of the most famous things about it is just one of like, what just happened?
Yeah, like
how did that just happen?
How did that happen? And so many people that we care about are now gone.
Totally gone.
In most shows, it's like you might lose one, maybe two.
Right.
But yeah, you get multiple in one episode, or just for sure over the course of a season, multiple people that you really loved dying, and not just in ways that you expect. Sometimes it's out of nowhere. And part of that's just because it's based off of history. Like, it's a fantasy story. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's real, but like the Lannisters and Starks are based off of the Lancasters and Yorks. Like, a lot of this is based off of the War of the Roses. And so you can kind of trace some of what could happen just if you have, you know, any knowledge of that part of history. You know, the character of Tyrion, you can really do a strong comparison with Richard III, both the historical Richard III and the Shakespearean Richard III. And so, you know, he's doing what all good authors do, which is steal. Like, that's what Oscar Wilde said. Like, you know, great artists steal. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And he's stealing from history. He's stealing some from literature, and a lot of it is original. But that's, I think, why it feels so gut-wrenching as a fantasy show, but more succinctly feels so real about a fantasy show, is that it is real. Like, there aren't heroes in real life. Like, anyone can go at any point. Yeah. And he did a great job of putting that into a book series, and then eventually into a show of like, yeah, you might like this person, but he's not safe.
Right.
Like, he made a bad decision. Okay. Like, that's the end of it for him. Whereas, you know, nothing against these other series, but like, you know, the Star Wars, let's say, I can turn on a Star Wars and within 10 minutes go, oh, okay. Like, he's got plot armor. Like, we don't need to worry about him. Yeah. Like, that character is going to be fine by the end of this movie. Yeah. You couldn't do that with Game of Thrones. Like, you'd be like, oh, that person, they'll be here by the end of the show, and then they're dead by the end of the episode.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, again, in case no one's watched it and they're going to be inspired by the two of us, yeah, it's insane like that. I'm trying to remember. I have two things in my head I want to remember for sure, because that's one fun thing about doing this when you do it unscripted is like, you say something that makes something pop into my head. And so one of those two things was like the Red Wedding. It happened, I think, during the spring of your senior year. I think I swear that's 2013.
Right. That sounds right.
And it was funny how it was so popular. It was almost like a sporting event, because I used to use something called TweetDeck, where I could see all of my Twitters, whether it was me, Coach Wherley, Illini Central Sports Network, whatever. And I wish they wouldn't have gotten rid of that. I love that. You can't do it anymore. But like during a Sunday evening, you're on Twitter and people are watching Game of Thrones, and all of a sudden it's like Osama bin Laden just got killed, and your Twitter feed is going at such a rate, or the Super Bowl is going on and it's going at like every single tweet is something about that. That's how amazing
if you
and
missed
how
an
shocking
episode,
some of those things
if
were.
you missed an episode, you couldn't go online until you watched the episode, because people were spoiling everything, because they just assumed everyone else was watching it, and they assumed correctly. Like pretty much everybody was watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say, how about a show that has so many young actors, unknown actors, that become just like, and they're terrific in their roles.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I've ever watched a show that had characters that you either A, fell in love with and you like were attached to them, or B, disdained them to the point that you were glad when they met their demise. Like,
but what's great about Game of Thrones is those two, like if we stick with those two, like the people you love so much and the people you disdain so much, that'll change quickly. Like there's a character that you will hate for the first 2 seasons.
100%.
And then by the 3rd season, 4th season, you realize, wait, I kind of feel bad for this guy. Like, wait, do I like him? And then likewise, people that you think are really good characters, and then a couple seasons in, you go, wow, this dude, I'm ready for him to go. Like he needs to go right now.
I don't think I've ever watched anything like it. I'm sure I haven't. It was such a great, and I personally was really disappointed in the end of it.
Sure.
But I've talked to other good friends who are big Game of Thrones people who weren't as anti season 8 as I was, but I really disappointed in how it ended. Not in terms of where they went, just in the rush.
How rushed it was.
Really tried to get through a lot.
That's why I tell people, ask me like, oh, do you think that's how it's gonna end? And I tell them, yeah, probably. Like maybe not 100%, probably not 100%, but I tell them like, with the 5 books that are out, we're still waiting on 2 more. It's been almost 15 years.
Right.
But
Mr. Martin's taking his time.
He is taking his time. But where those books are, that ending is in sight. It's just that the show cut some characters, they cut some storylines, and because of that, they had an ending that they hadn't earned. Like there are a lot of moving pieces that were taken off the board, and then they had to substitute and kind of jerry-rig something together. So by the end, I wasn't as disappointed because, again, for me, I can look and go, oh, okay, that storyline that he's talked about in book 5 is probably going to lead to this. That makes sense. Oh, okay, the character that they got rid of will probably actually serve this purpose, and that makes more sense than this, the person they substituted in. But the rushed aspect of season 8 for sure is bad. Like they could have handed that show off to different showrunners and gave it 2 more seasons, and it would have landed the plane a lot nicer.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, is knowing that the main people had their eye on Star Wars, regardless of what it was. It's not because it was Star Wars, but like, hey, we're going to go do this, and then after the fact, they lose that.
Yeah.
Like, not only did they rush through the final season to do something that actually they didn't end up getting
because
to
of
do
how
anyway. Right.
bad the final season went.
Right.
They lost the bag.
Right. Yeah. And that would be my only thing. But normal internet, social media or whatever, all of a sudden lately I clicked on a couple tweets that were like Game of Thrones tweets, just like basically going back to this episode was released at this time, like on, so now I have more of them popping up, and I watch some of them, and you're just like, you already have such a love for it. And then you see, it's like, oh my gosh, like this scene, where Tyrion and his dad are going back and, like going back and forth, and you forgot about it. Cause like I said, we devoured it in such a short period of time. I really do need to go back and watch it at more of a regular, normal pace than we're going to watch 4 episodes in a row.
You're going to just sit there for 5 hours and watch it. Yeah. You're going to know you're going to remember the big story beats, but there's going to be a lot of important subtext or, you know, just little conversations that you don't realize until a second watch through were foreshadowing some pretty significant situations.
Because the only thing I've ever really, we binged Stranger Things too, but I really binged the show 24. But it's not as in depth, obviously, as this. And you've talked about how the books have way more characters than the show does.
And the show has a lot of characters too.
Right. But, and the show has a lot of characters. And you said that the books are have way more. I've made it through the first book. I will say, having read a number of books that end up being movies or shows or whatever, i.e. Silence of the Lambs, Jurassic Park. Boy, that first book's pretty darn close to. I mean, when they made the show, they did other than a couple things I can think of.
2 to 3 seasons, maybe even the first 4 seasons, were very good adaptations of the books. And whenever they made changes in the show, almost always, as a book reader, I was like, okay, like I understand why they did that. That was a budget purpose, or there were, you just can't have another actor like. TV audiences are different than book audiences. You can't add too many characters. They might get confused or bogged down. Like I get this. Once they outran the books, which happened after season 5, that's when you start to see a little bit of like, okay, like you're kind of outkicked your coverage a little bit. But the first season and the first book were
insanely close.
Very close. Yeah.
Like almost the only thing I could really remember, and it's not giving anything away, but it was when they ended up getting Ned and he gets hurt. How he got hurt in the book was like, I think he fell off a horse or something, right? Like they, it was not what, someone stabs him in the back of the, the calf or whatever. In
and again, and stuff like that is also part of that's just budgetary reasons.
Right.
Like that's a different kind of stunt you have to do. And it's a little bit more of a fight in the book. And I was just talking to a friend last night that in the first season of Game of Thrones, maybe actually the second season, there's a battle scene that should happen based off the book. That Tyrion fights in and actually fights in. Like he kills people. Like he is in the thick of a battle.
Yeah.
And in the show, and what's probably a reference to The Hobbit, the chapter in The Hobbit where the 5 armies starts, in which Bilbo gets bonked on the head and then misses the entire battle. In the show, because they don't have the budget probably for a large fight scene, they just have Tyrion get bonked in the head and then he wakes up after the battle's over. Yeah. It's like those are the type of changes where I go, I get it. Like part of the reason George Martin wrote the book is he was originally a TV writer. Like he had other books, other novels, short stories coming out, but like he wrote on like there's an old Beauty and the Beast TV show that he was a writer on. He wrote for the revamped Twilight Zone, which was in the 80s, I think. So like he had TV writing expertise and skills, and he got tired of people telling him like, "Hey, we can't do that. Like your ideas are a little too big for what we have." Which is why everything in Game of Thrones is so grandiose, because he just decided these armies are going to be massive, these castles are going to be impossible, and all this stuff. And so those are the changes where I go, okay, I get it. We're back to George's initial problem. We've come full circle. You don't have the budget for that fight. That's a fine thing. We can skip it and move forward. But then there are other changes and character cuts where I just sit there scratching my head. It's like, that was kind of important to the story. That was one maybe we shouldn't have cut, but all in all, it's a great show. And even if the ending is a little bit choppy, I think the journey to get there is still worth it.
Yeah, it's funny. I regretted waiting so long to watch it, but I'm so glad I did. And it just the number of episodes that you are just so iconic. For me personally, Battle of the Bastards followed up by what is it? The Winds of
Winter. Yeah,
that Winds of Winter episode. I don't know. That is one of my favorite things of all time. Just on the beginning of that, and the fact that there's very little, if anything, very little, if any, dialogue at the beginning of it. It's just the music. When the music is instrumental music that ends up in my top 100 Spotify songs of the year, when we were catching up, and like I listen, because it's so good. The characters, I'm not sure Tyrion isn't one of my favorite characters of all time. Like I just love him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of that, but I think there's at least 3. I know this because I have to get kids' Chromebooks ready at school. So I have to assign them to them, and I write their name. There's probably 4 or 5 Arias at Illini Central.
Are there
currently
really?
not spelled exactly like that, but it's just funny. It made me think one day after I had written the name Aria, going through multiple grade levels at least 3 times. It's like, I wonder.
Yep. That's what my wife's an academic advisor at Illinois State, and she said she had a Khaleesi come in the other day.
Oh, really?
And if that's not a sign to not name your children until a story's complete, then I don't know what is.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Brienne is my character. I'm a big Brienne of Tarth fan.
Really? Yeah.
I don't know how serious we talked about it, but there was a brief conversation of maybe having Brienne be our daughter's middle name. But I was like, that might be even too nerdy for me. Like, maybe I'll back off a little bit. But one of my tattoos, this tattoo on my forearm here, is a Brienne of Tarth book reference. She doesn't say the quote in the show, but yeah, there's a lot of great characters on there.
Yeah, I'm a Tyrion person. I love Bronn. Bronn is one of my favorite characters too. And Arya's storyline is very cool. And the times that she really is a badass and is vengeful are pretty good. And the Hound became someone that I liked towards the
one of those characters, where when you first meet him, you're like, this guy kind of sucks.
Right,
he's with Joffrey the whole time, and he's kind of doing his bidding.
Right. Yeah.
What he does to Micah, the butcher's boy.
Right.
And then season 4 rolls around, and you're like, God, the Hound's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. And Cersei is funny too. There's just some. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's just I know. We were around some friends who weren't watching it towards the end when it was about over, and they'll probably never watch it. But if you listen to this and you've ever even considered it, you will not regret it, unless of course it's just absolutely not your thing and you can't handle it. And that's fine too. But yeah, it was. I never dreamt my wife would love it.
Yeah,
and she absolutely.
Well, that's kind of how I felt with my dad and Seth both. I think I was surprised how much they liked it, and we would talk about it a bit, and I was like, "Yeah, this is just not a show that I'm surprised that I'm glad you're into it. This is something that we both like, and now we can talk about it." But I was really surprised how much they both liked it. And I don't know about Seth, but I know my dad's having a hard time with House of the Dragon, which is the currently airing. I wanted to
go to.
I can see through the crack in your door, fire and blood.
Yeah, the boy or Gage got it for me for Christmas.
Okay,
it's pretty intense. It's pretty heavy.
Well, it reads like a history book instead of a novel, so it's a little different.
Yeah, I didn't get very far, but I need to finish it at some point. Yes, but how's the show for you? We haven't watched any yet.
And oh, really? Okay.
Gage has asked me, or we watched the first season, but I mean, the second season we haven't. When it started, we had our niece and nephew over. I'm like, we're not watching that with them here. So then I kind of decided, I think I'm going to wait until it's almost done.
We've only got 2 weeks left of it.
Right. So then that way you can just make a run at it if you want to. I mean, you could binge it, which I just said was not always a good thing. But I mean, it's different in terms of its length. But, because I'm talking about binging
like multiple seasons at a time.
Yeah, that's what we were doing. We were watching 3 a night for 7 days straight.
Yeah.
Get your plate ready. We're going
to be on the couch for 5 hours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I liked the first season.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's I think it's fallen into some of the same traps as final season of Thrones. Because before the show came out, I had told people that it won't have the same reach as Game of Thrones, but there was a possibility, technically speaking, it would be better. I don't think it lived up to that. But I still think it's a good show. And we're running into some of the things I talked about a second ago with there are changes that they make that I'm a little on the fence of. I don't know if you need to do that. And then there are some changes that I just sit back and go, okay, that's very different from the book. But you're entertaining a TV audience, which is different than a book audience. I get it. It makes sense why you're wanting to, connect this show in that way to Game of Thrones, or why you made certain changes for budgetary, whatever. So I still enjoy it. Like whatever we're watching it, Sunday nights at 7:58 gets turned off so that I can get to House of the Dragon at 8:00. I make sure I'm on it when it comes out.
Right.
And I'm excited for the prequel that's coming out in a year or two, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Like I'm gonna same way. Like Sunday nights at 8:00 when that show's out.
Yeah.
Don't text me. Like I'm gonna be busy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoyed that first season. Of course, the bar had been set so high with Game of Thrones but it was really good and we enjoyed it. And I am looking forward to like when it's done, the second season's done, making a run at it then that way.
Yeah.
It would be remiss if we didn't at some point talk about basketball a little bit. I just had Duncan and Cameron over the other day, and Duncan and I were talking. We talked some about 2013 and 2012. Looking back 11 years later, some people can listen to whatever Duncan said, but I'd be interested to see what you think looking back 11 years after you graduated from high school, won a state championship that had been not predetermined, but thought that there was a possibility if things happen. When you look back at 28, are you 28 yet?
I'm 29.
29 at 20, which is just insane. When you look back on that, the experience that we had today, what do you think about it? And I'm not saying you sit around and think about it because I agree with Duncan. It was a great thing. Like it didn't define your life.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect your...
If I sat here and talked about how I thought about that every day, this would be the saddest podcast in existence.
Right. It'd be really sad, especially since we started out talking about your child.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
I think, when I think about it, and this is probably the basic answer. This is probably what a lot of those guys would say, but it really is just like the relationships, like just being able to do that with the kids that, I spent so much time with outside of basketball. They were at my house or I was at their house every day. I was thinking the other day, there's a Wendy's commercial right now that has a song that was used in Workaholics, for interstitials. And I completely forgot about this, but there was like a 2 or 3 year period where every Wednesday night, like most of the guys it felt like on the basketball team were at my house to watch the new episode of Workaholics. And so it's just like having those relationships and then being able to work together towards that goal was like, that's what I care about. Like the state championship in some way, I guess, like makes it worth it. But even if we didn't have that, there's a lot of lessons that were learned through, just working together with them towards that goal. And for me personally, I was, talking with some people recently, and I told them one of the things that I tried to do when I was on the team and that I still try to do now, really in any aspect, whether it's work or even in my hobbies. Like I said, I kind of joked earlier about Dungeons and Dragons. I play that consistently. Like I play 2 times a week. But so really any aspect of my life, or now even parenting, I think okay, if the other people or other person I'm doing this with, if they were exactly like me, would I be happy with the effort that they were given? Or in basketball, it's okay, if I'm on the court and the other 4 guys on the court with me, if they're going exactly as hard as I'm going, am I going to be okay with that? Because if the answer to that is no, then I need to pick it up. Because that's not fair to my teammates. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to my coaches. I need to get going because I can't get mad at so-and-so for not getting a rebound when I wasn't going as hard as I could for that rebound. It's just those lessons that I think we had to teach ourselves or just learned through, being a part of something with that group that really did have longer lasting effects on how I view myself, how I view the world, and how I need to interact with the people around me.
Yeah, it's kind of, we talked about some of that with Duncan, and I think that is, that's why it's so important to be a part of a team. And regardless of how whether the end is a ring or the end is a loss in the first game of the regional, there's things to be learned and there's habits to be built that could then help you later in life. And when you said the relationships, I think we've always said that. We rarely get together and just talk X's and O's. We talk about memories and relationships and when this person stepped up or did this or that or whatever. Yeah, it clearly was fun that it ended the way that it ended.
Yeah.
But if it hadn't, I don't think it would have minimized the things that you're mentioning.
If we didn't win the state championship, the only thing that would be different in my life right now is I would have one fewer hoodies in my closet.
Right.
Like that's the only thing that would be different.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I don't, me and Duncan wouldn't be less close if we lost, before the state championship game. You and I would still be sitting here talking had we lost that state championship game. It doesn't, none of that changes because we happened to win. It's fun. Yeah, I'm glad we got to do it. It's fun if I go to Champaign to watch the state games and I'm looking at the program. It's fun to still see, Jared or Jordan or Duncan's name in there, or if they have like a list of previous champions, like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But realistically, the only thing different is that my closet has room for an extra hoodie because my state championship one's gone.
And I think I wish we could convince people, if they would listen to this, that they would listen, that if you then approach your team and whether you're a sixth grader all the way up to a senior, the way we're talking about, you'll have a better chance of getting closer to what we did than if you just think it's all about X's and O's or my shot, your shot, whatever. That ultimately it did come down to what you were saying. Am I going, am I playing to the level or with the same intensity that everybody around me is? And am I, looking at yourself in the mirror? My friend Jerry tagged me in something on Facebook the other day. I was talking about Michael Jordan and, when he got cut from the team, regardless of what that situation was, his mom didn't go after the coach. His mom didn't come, his mom told him to work harder. It was all these lists of things that seem to happen more today than happened when you were in high school, where it's not always someone like work harder. Maybe if you work harder, you'll get what you want. Not let's find someone to blame and let's try to tilt the board so that I get what I want. I think that I really do look back on that period. I think I'll always look back on that period of time and realize it was about relationships and about, I said it on the one on Monday or on Tuesday. It's Justin's line, play as a team or play defense, play as a team, and we love each other. It really kind of was that simple. Yeah. It really was that simple. For sure. And we talked a lot about Coach Giesler too, this is how we do things. Yeah.
I'm at this point, I'm more happy that we won it so that he had it than I am for us, like that's more important to me.
Right. Yeah. Because it validated his way of doing, his way of doing
he
things.
earned that a whole hell of a lot more than any of us dummies did.
Because he didn't waver from what he thought was how you do it. Yeah, that's true. It really is. Because we really got into that. Like we did the same thing every day in practice. Yeah. Like you graduated from high school and you could have texted me. Well, I know
I could do the first 45 minutes of a Coach Giesler practice right now.
Right.
Like it'll be the same every time.
Yeah, it was funny because some of you guys, I don't remember who exactly, but texted me your freshman year in college or your first year out. And first day of practice, like, I bet I know what you're doing right now. I bet I know what you're doing. I bet I know what drill you're doing right now. And whatever it was exactly right.
I thought you could set your watch to it.
It was exactly what we were doing at that time. Like it was like 3:25. I bet you're doing this. I mean, good times, and we'll always have that. Like I look at pictures. I obviously have a lot of them, and good memories. One of the most awful, ugly games to watch, the last one, but the result was pretty good.
Win's a win.
Or win's a win.
Doesn't matter
how. It doesn't matter what it necessarily.
Win by 11. Still got the ring.
That's I mean, and that's honestly that's what it comes down to, because it was, and I think I've watched it all the way through one time because it was all I could handle. I'll cut to the good parts, but one other thing that we should talk about is music, because music's such a huge part of our lives. And we've talked about how, I don't know if you're as big into the 80s. Do you listen to a
Not
lot?
really.
You're not
I
an
mean, the 80s music that I'm listening to is going to be different than the 80s music you're listening to, probably. Like, it's going to be more of like the 80s punk and hardcore scene.
Yeah.
With the exception of like, we talked off at mic, about Talking Heads.
Right.
So, I mean, there is some of that 80s music I'm listening to. We could get into a very rich discussion about the 80s discography of Weird Al, but I don't know if your audience is ready for that one.
I can't. You're a huge Weird Al fan.
Big.
And I obviously remember him when he was, when he, became popular or was starting to gain traction. But yeah, it's never been my thing.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you and I are both very, very deep into our musical bags. We just happen to have pretty different tastes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the things that you listen to are things that I would definitely, because I've said this, I'm so much more open-minded now than what I ever was. I'm obviously when you're 53, not when you're 17, but all over the place. There's only certain things that I really I probably wouldn't give very much time to. But we do have the early 90s in the beginning, like in the alternative thing in common.
Yeah.
I don't remember you and I talking about it, but I saw something one day that had it was like a meme-ish, best voice. Which one of these best voices from the 90s?
Oh, sure.
And it was Cornell, Eddie Vedder,
Cobain and Staley.
It was actually Billy Joe Armstrong.
Oh,
I remembered it the other day as the other one, and it was not Lane Staley.
Okay.
So who are you leaning to, like? And I'm not even like leading you, and I know what you're going to say. I know you like Nirvana.
Yeah.
I know you were a Nirvana fan. I don't remember for sure whether you had much of an opinion one way or the other about Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. So where do you lean in that?
If we're limiting it to just those four, I'm a Cobain guy. Like, I think his voice was perfect for that style of music. And that's not to take away from Vedder because Cornell's voice was insane as well. I probably agree with you and Ian that Staley had the best voice.
Right. Most angsty voice. Like his voice, at least, not that the others didn't, but there's just something about his is different.
Well, because Cobain and Nirvana, as you know, they're the poster child of grunge, but there was a lot of pop elements to Nirvana, which meant his voice had to have some pop to it, you know, and you get that even like, I remember listening to not Steve Albini. It would have been Butch Vig, I believe, is who produced Nevermind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
From Garbage. And I remember listening to him talk about he wanted to get Kurt to do some like backing vocals or like some layered vocals on one of their songs, and Kurt wouldn't do it until Butch said, "Oh, like John Lennon did it. Like this is how the Beatles would do it," and that got him to go back into the studio to do the layered vocals. So like he had that pop sensibility in a way that like that's not working on Lane Staley. Like he's gonna give you the voice and then he's gonna walk away and say, "This is what you got. You know, we're done here." Yeah. So yeah, if we're sticking to just the four you mentioned, I'd go Cobain. If not, I would probably expand it to Staley, even if Alice in Chains wasn't my favorite band of that era. But I mean, there are so many other good bands that had great voices, you know, great singers, and that, like you know, you look at Pixies. I think Black Francis's voice, it's unique, but I think he has a great voice.
Yeah, I listen to them a lot. Yeah, definitely. And then again, I really like Smashing Pumpkins was such a big part. Yeah. Billy Corgan, you know, for whatever his ego is for some people, I love their music. Yeah. They put out some albums that were just terrific. Siamese Dream is kind of front to back.
Dream
yeah.
And Melancholy, like are both great albums. I don't know if I'd put his voice up there. He's got which I like his voice, but as far as like the best voices, I don't know if I could put him up there.
Or just stirring voice. You know, again, that's where Lane Staley in my book is, you know, so much further ahead of the others, even though they have good voices too. Gish was really good too. I bought Gish in 91 and didn't know a song from him. I just saw a band named Smashing Pumpkins. And when you were my age, you just burnt money. Yeah. You know, you just lit it on fire and you saw that. And you're like, I bet these guys are good. And it actually worked out for once. Yeah. The Stone Temple Pilots took a bunch of crap because people thought they were trying to sound like Pearl Jam, but I like Scott Weiland's voice too. He has, I mean, they made good music too. They did. I mean, they never got the credit in that same
Yeah.
way.
It's like, 'cause I was never a big Pilots fan. I mean, they're again
Right.
fine, and whenever their songs came on, I wasn't gonna turn the station if I was listening to the radio. But at that point, whenever I was doing that, for me it was I'm going into Walmart and begging my dad for $10 so I can buy a CD based off of the cover or based off of the name of the band or whatever. Or I had Apple or iTunes gift cards and I'm buying stuff, and so I'm not going out of my way to buy a Stone Temple Pilots album as opposed to maybe. And I'm not the biggest Radiohead fan either. I like Radiohead, but I feel like the people who like Radiohead, they are like all in.
Yeah, well, I am,
and I think it may be even more like an REM guy than a Radiohead guy. But Stone Temple Pilots, I feel like we're just always at the bottom. If I was holding two records, it's almost a guarantee that I'm picking the one opposite Stone Temple Pilots.
It was always, it probably, and it was considered that, like those other bands light, like a light version of them. Now you bring up Radiohead. Yeah, I could talk all day about Radiohead, and Radiohead wasn't one of the ones that I was that big really into them that much at that time. My friend Chad had Pablo Honey, and obviously Creep is one of their most popular songs.
And that's like Tom York's least favorite song and album.
Right,
like,
yeah.
He
And
hates it.
It's a really huge departure in some ways. It's more rock and roll probably than obviously Kid A,
OK
or
Computer.
I'm not sure In Rainbows isn't my favorite album of all time.
Yeah.
I love In Rainbows. I could listen to it front to back. And that's the one that when they were being all different, and you could pay them nothing for it. You could download it for free, or you could, pay for it like you normally would. Yeah, I love them. They're in some ways my Pink Floyd after Pink Floyd in that. I mean, I'm not saying their music is entirely similar, but in my world, I listen to them all the time.
Yeah, no, because I got even, and this is still in the alternative scene, but like we could tone it back into like a Neutral Milk Hotel or like the entire Elephant Six recording collective. Like I was all over that. I loved Neutral Milk Hotel, Elf Power of Montreal, the Gerbils, Apples in Stereo. Like I loved that stuff. But then I also pretty quickly, found, you and Ian talked about a week or two ago on finding music through streaming and like how you just kind of go down the rabbit hole. And I had mentioned that I'm not saying I don't do that. I do that often, but this is whenever, you have Pandora, you just hope that something gets put up that you like and that's new and different and that you have enough skips left to where if you don't like it, you can get to the next song. Or for me, I did a lot of I found online magazines and interviews, or I read like biographies of like a Kurt Cobain to find new artists. And I couldn't tell you who I was reading about, but I remember someone that I was listening to at the time mentioned Fugazi. And so I listened to 13 songs.
Yeah, I've listened. Yep.
And it was either 13 songs or it might have even been In on the Kill Take. But I listened to it and I was like, man, this is really good. So then I start looking up Fugazi and it says, Ian MacKaye, also in Embrace and Minor Threat. So then it's like, well, I like Fugazi. Let me check these other bands out.
Yep.
And Embrace was kind of like one of the early emo bands alongside in Fugazi. He had the drummer and the other guitarist. I'm drawing a blank on their names. Were in Rites of Spring. So like, all right, so right there, I've now found Fugazi, Minor Threat, Rites of Spring, and Embrace. Just because I did a little bit of research, and now, cool, I've got 4 artists that I can go check out and love Minor Threat. And it's like, okay, now I'm forayed into punk music. And I've got to listen to Minor Threat and Black Flag, the Dead Kennedys, kind of like the early, and it's probably a oxymoron to say the mainstream punk bands, but they were the ones that were more known. I found my way to them pretty quickly. And then I'm listening to Rites of Spring and Embrace. And Embrace has a great early emo album. And when I say emo, I don't mean like Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. Like this I don't want anyone to listen to this who thinks that they listened, like that's scene music. That's kind of mall emo, which is separate from what, like music criticism would consider emo. But Embrace has a song called Do Not Consider Yourself Free. It's like that's probably a top 10 song for me of all time. I love Do Not Consider Yourself Free by Embrace. But anyway, so then I kind of reverse engineered it to find even more albums or bands in the 90s that I liked. And I stumbled on like The Promise Ring. So it's like, okay, now I'm listening to The Promise Ring. Nothing Feels Good. Great album. And through them, it's like, oh, this guy used to be in American Football out of Champaign. Okay, wait, American Football, they were also in a band called Cap'n Jazz, and then they have another band called Owls. And so it's just so quickly, just doing, like, reading up on the artists that you like, it spreads. Like, it's just like the roots of a tree. Next thing you know, I've got 8 punk bands in my back pocket. I've got, like, 80s, like, first wave emo and hardcore through that. And now I've got like these 90s Midwest emo and alternative bands, and are separate from, your Nirvana, which is where I found, reading a Heavier Than Heaven, a Kurt Cobain biography in 7th grade, is where I found out about like Green River and Mother Love Bone and Tad. And so that's like, for me to find music, and even still today I try to do this, is less so than on Spotify, who else do people who like this band listen to? It's who are these artists listening to? Like, I want to hear who influenced you, because that's going to show me things that I probably haven't heard before, because you're more in the scene, which I think is what has led to, like, with my like music of the 90s and my taste of the 90s, there's a lot of popular like alt and grunge bands, or what would be playing on college radio stations in the 90s.
Yeah.
But I think where you and I diverged was I ended up somehow, as a kid in Central Illinois, I ended up in like the underground rock scenes of both the Midwest, but also both coasts, and really stayed there rather than like returning back up to the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say that about Fugazi, it's funny, because I was trying to think where I heard about them, because I remember buying a couple of their songs off of something that's not, I think it's a defunct website now. I don't even remember what it's called. It wasn't iTunes. I have no clue what it is now. I don't know if I don't know if the Chili Peppers talked about them, because I was really big into the Chili Peppers. I mean, I still love them, but I don't whether Flea had mentioned. I don't know. It's been years and years.
Ian
ago.
MacKaye did Discord Records, and so there was a lot of, someone like Flea would probably be talking about him, just because not even outside of the bands Ian MacKaye was in, Discord Records was so big in the underground and the punk scene that someone like a Flea would probably, even if he wasn't talking about that band specifically, mentioning Ian MacKaye would have been likely.
Yeah, I remember when you said 13 songs, it's immediately what I thought of when you said them. And I had or have a couple of their songs that I had downloaded from whatever this site was. I can't think of it now. But it's also how I found a band called Thievery Corporation, which is like instrumentally like dubs. I don't even know how you describe them, but yeah, I found all kinds of. Well, I found Sufjan Stevens off that too.
Yeah.
Like I found there was a bunch of things I was listening to that period of time that came off of just ending up in this rabbit hole that I didn't really know what I was even downloading always. And I think that's what, and I like being able to, and streaming makes it so if someone's listening to this and they hear any of those people you just named, they can throw it in there now. And they're listening to it now. They don't have to find somebody who actually physically has it in their hands. Yeah. And that's one of the things. And like you mentioned, when Ian and I were talking about it, it opens the world up to all different kinds of things that you wouldn't have been able to do, especially when you grew up in the middle of Illinois.
Well, 'cause I remember I've discovered a few of my favorite bands ever when it might have been before I even came to Illini Central. So I was still living in Mason City, but I didn't come to IC until 7th grade. I was at a private school in Lincoln. And it might have even been pre-transitioning to IC. But I remember over in Bushnell, Illinois, there used to be a
Cornerstone.
Very big Christian music festival called Cornerstone.
Yeah.
And I found out about that at a young age. Really wanted to go. Couldn't. I'm like 10 years old. Couldn't go. But I started looking up, like, oh, who's going to be there? Like, I want to listen to the bands that are going to be at this place. And I found, like, Me Without You through them. And that's Me Without You and the Mountain Goats are, like, my 1A, 1B. Like, I couldn't choose between the two of them as far as favorite bands go. Very different stylistically. Me Without You's kind of post-hardcore. Mountain Goats they jokingly call themselves a dad rock band, and they kind of are. But, they're a little bit more alternative. But I found like Me Without You and The Chariot for like some metal, Norma Jean, Under Oath, like just all these bands I would have never heard of being being in Mason City. Like no one's going to walk
Yeah.
up and hand me Catch for Us the Foxes by Me Without You, which has become my all-time favorite album. I mean, I've got a fox tattoo on my arm because of that album. And so it's funny looking back how I found some of these artists that I just am completely in love with now, and how it was just me sitting on a, dial-up computer looking up the headliners or the set list for bands that had played it at a Cornerstone in middle of nowhere, Illinois, and just falling in love with so many of them. And then again from them, it's like, oh, well, Me Without You did a tour with Manchester Orchestra, which is Dylan Hull's a big Manchester Orchestra fan. And now it's like, okay, like I'm going to check these guys out. They're going on tour with Me Without You. They must be pretty good. And who's going on tour with the Chariot? Devil Wears Prada. Oh, now I'm in love with that band. So it's just funny how much streaming has changed how you can even find bands, because now you don't have to do any research. Just go to Spotify. If you're a Luke Combs fan, you go to Luke Combs and you look up, who else is people who like Luke Combs, what are they listening to? Or you just play Luke Combs radio or whatever. It's just funny how different it used to be. And I'm saying that as someone who's not even 30, but look how different it is, for me, even compared to people who, had to go to the record store and just kind of flip through and hope that they liked what they bought. Like, I'm going to pay for this album and I hopefully get home and like it.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if Cornerstone's still a thing.
It's not. But the people who did Cornerstone started a new festival in Champaign called Audio Feed, which I've gone to multiple times. And again, some great bands there. But I remember, Cornerstone is where I found some of those bands I mentioned earlier. It's where I found Pedro the Lion from Champaign. I think that's where I found like So Long Forgotten and just so many good bands that it was a Christian festival, and some of them, especially at the time, were maybe a little bit more like outward Christian. But now most of those bands are making music, if they're still making music, that's just like maybe spiritual in some ways, but a lot of them are wrestling with stuff that they were not wrestling with in 2002. And it makes really interesting listens.
Yeah, because it's funny. Before I came here, when I went back and was a teacher's aide at home, the teacher that I worked with, she lived like right by where it was, like where they held it and stuff. I remember her talking about it. I mean, I literally lived 20 minutes from there, like Bushnell's not far from where the farm was that I grew up on. So yeah, I'd forgotten about that. But the minute you said that, I obviously thought I knew Cornerstone. But
yeah, Cornerstone introduced me to a lot of bands, and then the bands that they introduced me to even more. Like, because then I realized, this is like, For Me Without You, it's like, this is post-hardcore. I really like post-hardcore. Like, I need to listen to more of this. And so then I find, At the Drive-In, for example, or
I know them.
Centaur, or whatever it is. It's just like, okay, like this is a fun way to kind of expand my horizons a little bit, and it feels more organic than just an algorithm feeding me something, which I appreciate. I like that. Finding it yourself feels to me better than just hoping that Spotify's code happens to give you a song that you're going to really like.
Yeah, I use it to find I definitely play, like I call it, the related artist game. Like I will listen to even if it's something from the 80s to remind you of something else. You got 12 things to pick from. Or even, what Ian and I mentioned, you listen to Coulter Wall, or you listen to some other country western singer, and it leads you to somebody else that's in that same thing that you're not hearing them on Rhonda's radio station in the morning. Or my buddies and I were laughing about, YMG. It's okay to listen to it if you want to listen to the same songs we were listening to when we were 16, driving around. But again, being able to not have to own it or have to know somebody that has it to find things, it definitely gives you an opportunity to listen. I obviously listened to way more music, way more diverse music at 53 than I did at 13. And I listened to a lot of music at 13.
Yeah. I was very, like a lot of these bands I'm talking about, right? A lot of these bands I'm talking about are in the rock field, whether it's hardcore, punk, emo, post-hardcore, whatever it is. And I used to be like pretty anti like country or anti hip hop. And part of that was just because everyone else I knew listened to it, and I was kind of reacting against that. Like, no, this is my thing that I'm listening to, and I don't like. It felt very combative for some reason. But like, yeah, now like love Kendrick Lamar, love Pusha T. I'm not a big Kanye fan like you are, but like some newer guys like Joey Badass, JID, like really just expanded that. Went back and listened to some old hip hop, like early '90s, and I can never really get into country like you and Ian could in your conversation. I love Justin Towns Earl. He's a modern guy, Steve Earle's son.
Yeah.
He died recently, unfortunately, but his albums have always been really big hits for me. And then I find myself listening to like old folk music. Like I'm a big Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, Utah Phillips, John Paxton. So I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Like as I've gotten older, it's like there's good music and there's good art everywhere. Like let me open up a little bit and find what I like, even if it's not in a genre that I typically would find myself.
Yeah, because when Ian asked me about how I got to listen to like rap and hip hop music, and I explained Run DMC and whatever, because again, living in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. But yeah, I listened to that so much too. In '91 when I think in my life, 1984 and 1991 are my two favorite musical years. Okay. I think if I stacked albums up, if we made, those would be ones that would be the hardest years to pick a top 10 because there's so much. And Public Enemy had put out Apocalypse 91, and that was the first time I had really heard them, and I just listened to them all the time. So then I'm buying all of their album or their CDs and you listen to them a lot. I mentioned, Dr. Dre and Snoop and Beastie Boys, but like you said, even like now Kendrick Lamar, listen to that a lot. I don't even remember how much Ian and I talked about him, but I love him. Yeah. Even though he's in the middle of his beef with Drake.
I love him even more for that because I've hated Drake since.
The funny thing is
2008. I hated Drake.
It's funny thing is but I like Drake. I've listened to a lot of Drake too, but it's been interesting. You don't have what happens in rap music happen in other styles of music for the most part.
I was talking to some friends. We're all big book readers, and I was like, and it actually has happened to some extent within the literary world. But I was like, wouldn't it be funny if you just get like authors and in like the dedication to a book, they just call out another author that they hate and just like air out a bunch of stuff about them, right? Or like poets just going back and forth about how much, or like if like David Lynch made a movie and the entire movie was just him dissing like Christopher Nolan, like that'd be great. I think it'd be good for everybody if they started doing that stuff. Yeah,
because it was pretty intense back and forth between those two, the things that they were saying, and then I the performance they had there in California, I don't know if you saw it on Amazon or not, but oh my gosh.
Loved every second of it.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Because I kept seeing tweets about it, and I'm like, what are they talking about? And I had no idea what it was. And I had seen something about it, and that's where we're in a bad time, is I'm scrolling so quickly that I don't even like take in what I'm scrolling. Yeah. Like I remember seeing something about it, but not paying attention enough to know that I was missing something. Finally, I'm like, where are they watching? Like, where is this at? And somehow I went to Amazon. Maybe I was going to go to buy something, and I saw it, and I'm like, wop, wop, wop. Yep. Oh man, that part, I was just, and the crowd just singing along, rapping along with them.
Six different times.
Yeah, that was something else. And again, it's just funny. I'm glad that I never got so old that I don't enjoy that. Like, I don't know if my dad, when he was 53, said, I don't even care if it's rap or what, it doesn't matter what it was. Yeah. It's just, I've never grown up when it comes. I still get excited about that stuff and still look forward.
Yeah. I mean, that's
new music to come out.
Yeah.
And,
that's one of my favorite things is like still just discovering new music, even if it's music that came out 10 years ago. If it's new to me, I love that. But I mean, there are so many good bands and artists out there that, either are getting the love that they deserve, which is great. There are plenty like, that Chapel Roan is really big right now. Not necessarily my kind of music, but it's good. Like I can appreciate what it is, even if it's not my favorite music. It's like, there's just always new good stuff coming out. I mean, you're wearing a Post Malone shirt at 53, like,
and it's funny,
good music.
And he's a neat example of someone who started over here and now, he covers some Brad Paisley song on YouTube. He doesn't even release it, and he's singing this country song, and he has a great voice for it. So now in a few weeks, he's putting out a country album. Like he released another song today with Luke Combs. Like he's doing a bunch of them with like other famous artists. And yeah, it's like he's kind of a goof, and people make fun of him because personally, I think he seems like he'd be a really neat guy to like be around. Like he just seems like a good guy. I know you never know that when there's someone's famous, but you know, he's known for like some rap songs that, you know, people wouldn't consider hard enough or whatever. And now he's making a country album. Yeah. He's just doing what he wants to do. Yeah. And, I 100% agree. It's so easy to find things. I was listening. I can't remember if I said it to Ian, because I don't remember if it was between then and now, but a guy named Charlie Crockett, Eric Hoffman, Rick put it on his and this is the other thing, Ian and I talked about.
Yeah, all these people
you share
just see,
stuff.
Yeah.
You share something in your Instagram story, because the way we do that now, and I'm listening to something because you just shared it out, you know, because you were listening to it, or someone looks at something that I put, but a country artist named Charlie Crockett, Rick puts it in his story. I listened to him last week, and there was one song that came on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great song. I never would have heard it if it wasn't been for that. And I think I listened to it 4 times that day, just that song, just because I just loved it. It was like, I mean, and again, when I was 16, that would have never, ever happened. Not having MTV, other than the radio, you weren't doing that. Again, like what you said, unless you went to the store and you just randomly bought something.
You either had to go to the store and hope, or the record, like the clerks would, you know, maybe help you out. Or if you were, like if I were your age, I would have been the kid who was like going through magazines, or even like the DIY zines, and just being like, oh wait, this is a random DIY zine, and they're talking about whatever random band. Boom, now I'm in, and I'm all for it.
Well, and not to go, you know, not political, but Rolling Stone used to be not so political when I was younger, and I got it, like I had a subscription to it. It was one of the things I got for Christmas. And you would always look at the album reviews, and whether you agreed with them or not, if you'd had it, but there was a way to find bands that you never knew. You never knew. So then you would at least have some reference to take a chance on buying an album if you trusted whoever. If the person that was writing the review had positively reviewed things that you did like, then you would take that person's opinion more than...
we seem to have a similar taste in music. Let me check out this new album.
Yeah, right. And I remember, or I'll find stuff on Spotify from during the late 80s, early 90s that I'll remember, oh yeah, I saw that for the first time when it was reviewed in there, and then go over to Wikipedia, because a lot of times Wikipedia will have what it would have been, how many stars it would have gotten,
Pitchfork
or whatever.
Gave it this, Rolling Stone, All Music, Kerrang, whatever.
That's something, you know, that was one way I would find stuff too.
Yeah.
But you were still rolling the dice on whether you would end up liking it or not, because you hadn't heard, like I said, I hadn't heard a single thing from a band called Smashing Pumpkins. And I talk about, you know, we talked about Chili Peppers a minute ago. There was a really cool record store, and I don't think I've told this story on podcast, but in Macomb, and the lady's name was Robin, and the store was called Rockin' Robins. And you'd go in there, and she had all kinds of things in there, and T-shirts and bags and hemp stuff, and, you know, that kind of place. And I had seen a commercial that had it was an Andre Agassi Nike commercial. And there's this goofy guy with long black hair, no shirt on, and then the guy with him is bald, that has his head shaved and big old gap in the front of his teeth. And somehow I figured it out. It was somebody called the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I don't know how I figured it out, because you didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
You weren't like now. We could search it on our phones instantly. Nike Agassi, you know, commercial, and it's going to come up. But anyway, I had never heard the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I figured out that's who it was. And she told me I could take home Mother's Milk and not pay for it. She trusted me to not record it. This isn't good business practice, I don't think. She's
it's great business practice.
Right, because she was like, I trust you not to, you know, dub it off onto a cassette. And if you like it, come back and pay me for it. If not, I'll take it back. then of course I went back and paid her for it, but it was just like, that's how I found them, was from a commercial that I had no idea who they were, what they were. And then she does that. And then they were like one of my favorite bands for the longest time. You know, I listened to them all the time.
Yeah. I mean, this is a more modern story, obviously, but a record store story for me is I went up to Waiting Room Records in Normal, which, as a callback, is named after the Fugazi song Waiting Room off of 13 songs. But I went in and I was wearing probably one of my Me Without You shirts. That's like half my wardrobe. And I start talking to one of the workers there, and they're like, "Oh, I love Me Without You," and we start talking about it. And they go, "Oh, have you heard this album?" And they give me an album. It's by a band called Chat Pile. Album is called God's Country. They're like a sludge metal noise rock band. And they're just like, "Oh, like we have, like, go over here." And I put headphones on. They have a little record player. They let it spin. And first song starts. And I think I was 30 seconds into it. I took the headphones off. I was like, "Yeah, bag that up. Like, that's coming home with me." Like,
Right,
that's,
yeah.
But just like, she saw me wearing a band that we had a mutual taste for. She was able to show me another artist that I didn't go in there looking for. I didn't know that band existed. Just some random Oklahoma City noise rock band.
Right.
But she saw enough similarities between me liking that band, her liking both bands, and saying, "Oh, if I like it, maybe you'll like it as well." And I love going into the record stores, or just like if I'm at a concert, maybe in between sets, chatting with the person. 'Cause I go to a lot of concerts by myself. My wife and I don't share the same music taste really, and honestly, there's a lot of my friends who don't share the same music taste with me. So I go to a lot of shows by myself, and just talking with people, oh, like they're wearing a military gun shirt. Like, I want to check them out. Like, that sounds like a cool band from that conversation. Get in the car to go home. Military gun, one of my favorite bands. You know what I mean? Just like, I love finding it organically like that, just through talking with folks at a concert or the record store, or they're wearing a band shirt or I'm wearing a band shirt, and that starts a conversation.
Right.
Like, it's just such a fun way to experience and discover without relying on the phone. Because you're right. Like, I could find those artists pretty quickly. Like, the algorithm is well trained and it knows what I like. It probably would have fed me those bands eventually. Yeah. But it felt like I defeated it by finding it myself. It's like, I got to it before you could. Like, you don't know me as well as you think you know me. Phone.
And the phone gives you the ability to access it quickly.
Yeah, like that part is nice
you didn't have to run to the store and buy it.
Yeah.
I think my t-shirt thing was, I went to Guns N' Roses a few years ago with my buddies in St. Louis when they were back there for the first time. And I wore my Zoso t-shirt. I think I got a compliment. Someone was like, "That's the best t-shirt I've seen all night." Jimmy Page, his sign, it was just funny because you want to wear, I don't have any Guns N' Roses. It was just funny. I said, I need to throw on something music. Yeah. And I didn't have, this was before I was buying t-shirts left and right, and got that good old Zoso shirt on. So, well, anything else you've got that we should, I mean, that's a pretty good podcast right there.
We covered it all, I think.
I think that when you cover fatherhood, Game of Thrones, basketball, and music,
you've kind of just summed me up. Unless you want to open the door for me to give a 20-minute presentation on Dungeons and Dragons, we should probably end it here.
Well, we need Jerry here, because my friend Jerry, he's like, I don't know if you saw that. Took that picture together when I was wearing my new Farrah Fawcett t-shirt.
Oh,
he was wearing his Dungeons and Dragons shirt. He and my friend Chad's dad Rod, they play all the time. Like, I have my Dungeons and Dragons books in here that I never hardly played it, but I bought all. We used to. They play. I think they still play too. They still play a lot.
I play twice a week on most weeks, and I play. I mean, one of the games I'm in is with Austin Harp and Quaid Lusher and Quaid's dad, and then a couple other people not from the area. But it's I could talk for 20 minutes, so we probably should cut it off here. No one wants to hear me talk about rolling dice and imagination for.
Well, for my buddies would, but maybe
give them my number.
Maybe not other people. So, well, I'm glad that you drove down here and we had this conversation. And I love you. We've been close forever and ever. A lot of great memories together, and look forward to making many more. And happy that you're a father and life's going well. And glad you could come down today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And love you too, man.
Yep.
It's been great.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this one. And like I say at the end of every one of them, because I really think it's important, you've got to remember find the positive things in your life. Life really, really is good. Say it.